Today I would like to share with you an inquiry project that I created for my Using Children's Literature in the Reading and Writing Classroom class. My inquiry project is titled Children's Literature Outside of the Classroom, and my name is Carly Norman. At the first week of our class, we were asked a question: what is children's literature? And at that time, this is how I answered this question. When thinking about children's literature, what does it mean to me? Memories of books I loved as a child, such as If You Give a Mouse a Cookie and Alexander and the No Good, Horrible, Very Bad Day. It's literature that's age appropriate to children, especially according to their reading level, and it includes content that children are interested in. I was given the opportunity to observe children outside of the context of the classroom, and I chose to do my observations on 3 of the children that I babysit. Their ages are 6 years old, 5 years old, and 2 years old. And they're all on different reading levels, so I thought that it would be an interesting mix to see how all of the ages are influenced by literature in one home. So to start off, I took the first 20 minutes of my observation just to go through some of their reading materials and their just everyday things that they do. So what I found first was that in each of the children's bedrooms, as well as in the parents' bedroom, there was a full bookshelf. So as you can see, there were a lot of reading materials available to these kids. Secondly, I noticed that there were a lot of meaningful writing opportunities throughout the house. There was a card-making stationery set that the kids told me they use pretty often. There was also invented spelling, kind of invented writing grocery lists around the house area that they had set up. And there was also written grocery lists by the oldest child on the refrigerator. So that was kind of all of their everyday writing experiences that they had, even though some of this was invented writing with the middle child. I also found that they all shared one iPad, all of the 3 children, and the 2 apps that I really did look into on there, one was called Little Readers and the other one was called Disney Spotlight Karaoke. So Little Readers, I thought that was the more beneficial one to their reading because it's actually an app that reads stories out loud to you and the words light up kind of like karaoke as the story is being read. And you can also click on a word to get a definition, or if you don't know what the word means, it can explain it to you. And the Disney Spotlight Karaoke is the same thing as you sing. It's a typical kind of karaoke that lights up the words as you're going along. So that really helps with tracking as well. So first I went into the room of the first grader and I looked at his book collection. And I asked him what was his favorite book currently, and he told me that his favorite book was Captain Underpants, but that's just a silly book, so we put that aside. And he told me that in his most recent trip to the library, he took out the book called Untamed. It's a book about Jane Goodall by National Geographic, and I asked him what prompted him to take out this book. And he said that he had gone on a class trip to the Bronx Zoo with his school, and when he had to choose a book to do a book report on, his mom suggested that because he really enjoyed looking at the monkeys and the chimpanzees. So this could be something that he could really apply for that. And these are also some of the other books listed that he was interested in that he had in his room. For the middle child, the 5-year-old, some of the books that he had in his room were Stella Luna, the Pete the Cat series, Curious George, the Star Wars collection of children's books, and Llama Llama Mrs. Mama. He told me that his favorite book of all of these are all of the Pete the Cat books because they're silly and they're kind of like songs. They're easy to follow. He also told me that each time he goes to the library, he checks out a Pete the Cat book and a Curious George book. And so he's an emerging reader, so he is in preschool right now. He's not quite reading. He can pick up some words, so he gets to pick out 2 of these books each night that his parents read to him. And the youngest child is 2, so I asked her brothers what her favorite book is, and they shared with me that she loves Goodnight Moon and she gets read to as well every night, but she reads this book every night and she can recite it based on her memory. Some of the other books that she had in her room were the Mr. Men and Little Miss series, like I said, Goodnight Moon, The New Baby, and Pat the Bunny. So out of all of these books, what really stuck out to me from each child were a few. The Llama Llama Mrs. Mama I thought was really interesting. When I asked the child's mother about this book, she said that he got a lot of anxiety going to preschool, and he used to have to carry around a picture of his family with him, which is really common, but his teacher actually let him borrow this book in the beginning of the year, and they ended up buying their own copy because he really liked the book and it helped him get over some of his anxieties for missing his family. Another thing that I really found interesting was The New Baby, the book by Mercer Meyer, and that book is about all of the good things about getting a new baby in the family and how it's not scary and it's just a great experience. So the mother shared with me that she's passed this book down from the oldest child to the youngest child because she's also now pregnant. And this book really, like I said, eases out some of the worries, and she reads this book to them very often to get them used to the new baby and the whole situation that's happening. And then I also thought that it was really interesting that she brought up to me that they have this book called And Tango Makes Three. She couldn't find it at the time, and I had never heard of it, but she explained to me that it's a book about two male penguins that are living in a zoo, and they fall in love with each other, and they end up getting their own little baby penguin because their love is so strong, just like the love of all the other penguins. And she actually told me that her brother and his boyfriend were getting married a couple years ago, and when she only had one child, he was a little bit confused about this before they went to the wedding. So since he was very young and he didn't know about it, the boyfriend or husband of her brother actually bought this book for him, and she reads it to all of her kids because this is something that she believes they should really be accustomed to. So I think that it's great that this literature kind of smooths out a lot of the confusions in a child's life. So now for the components of literacy that I saw in this home visit. The background knowledge of all of these books that the children had, like the books that they really enjoyed were the ones that they had a background knowledge of, because when they're choosing these reading materials or when somebody else chooses these materials for them, it really helps to understand when you have some sort of background knowledge, just like the oldest child with the Untamed book, the book about Jane Goodall. He knew about gorillas and chimpanzees and monkeys, and he knew that he liked them. That's why he chose it. Same with the Llama Llama Mrs. Mama and The New Baby. And next was fluency, and I feel that this really applies to the oldest child because he's really the one that's reading on his own right now. So each night when the children are read to, he breaks off and reads on his own for a little after that. And at this alone reading time is really when his speed and accuracy is being increased. So this is just really good practice that he gets to do this on his own, and he has all these resources to increase his fluency. And next was phonemic awareness. And this is really an auditory skill, so it's exercise when the children are being read to and they can actually hear the individual phonemes and words. And this is also an exercise this is also something that can be exercised with the Little Readers app and also even the karaoke app because it lights up as the words are being said. And similarly is phonics, which is also exercise each time the children are read to. And if the reader sounds out a word and really breaks down the elements for this child as he or she is sounding it out, it can really help the children to see and hear the individual letter and sound relationships in a word. And then we have vocabulary, which is obviously increased every time that a book is read. So if the oldest child is reading to himself or the youngest children are being read to, vocabulary is increased each time a new word is heard or they say, "Oh, Mom, what's that word?" Their vocabulary is being dramatically increased by this. And also even when a child's reading to themselves or being read to aloud, they can use the context clues and pictures or words around that unknown word to really figure out that vocabulary word, which is a very helpful critical thinking skill. Next we have comprehension. And as I said, comprehension is much more easier grasped when the child has a background knowledge of the book. But Comprehension can be facilitated in any reading situation. It's also especially helpful when the story has strong character setting and plot, because it's easy to grasp the events that are taking place in the book. And then we have motivation. And at this home environment, I felt that this was a really great place to observe literacy outside the classroom, because the motivation is so strong. And these children are intrinsically and extrinsically motivated because, number one, they're striving to be a good reader just like their older siblings. And the mother takes them to the library at least once a week, so that's a great motivation to finish your books, to get a new book. And she also gives them time on the iPad to play these educational reading games or reading softwares when their reading time in their books is finished. So this is really a lot of self-motivation and extrinsic motivation, and it gives them a feeling of accomplishment when they've finished and are moving on to a new book. So the components of literacy are really tied into this home environment of literacy. And lastly, writing. I saw a few opportunities for writing, as I mentioned before, and a lot of this is invented writing because two of the children aren't writing yet. Like I said, playing a story, writing a list with the birthday and holiday cards, and the meals for the week and grocery list on the refrigerator. But aside from that, all of these books and experiences with books that they're getting are a great model for their writing in the future. So these components of literacy really come together in this environment. So really, what does this mean to me? I've thought about my initial definition of literacy, which I thought I had a really good grasp on. But now that I realize all of these other things come into play through this exploration of my visit to these children's home, I really realized that I need to revisit my definition. So I looked back on it and I decided to tweak some things, and I wrote, literature that can be enjoyed by people of all ages. Children's literature is geared towards children under 18. It revolves around content that appears in a child's life often or seldom. It's conveyed through an author's child-appropriate style and conscious selection of character, setting, and plot. In addition, children's literature is organized into genres that categorize the literature by its subject. So I really tried to tie in the components of this project to revise my definition, and I feel that it's a real 180 from where I have started. So some of my afterthoughts that I'd like to share lastly were, I really enjoyed the setting of my inquiry project. These three children are children that I babysit, but this time that I did the inquiry project was actually only the third time that I met them. So it was good because I didn't really have a ton of information on their reading background or even their family lifestyle. So it was good that I had this kind of open-ended setting to start in. Also, I really, as I said, feel that my modification of my definition of children's literature has changed, so it was nice for me to kind of self-correct myself just based on real-life observations. It's the most beneficial kind of learning for me. And lastly, I feel like I really have a base for this class, a jumping-off point, and being that I saw all of these components of literacy in action, it's something that I can really visualize in my mind when I'm actually learning in this class. So this project was a great benefit to me.